In 2011, the Scottish National Party, a party that campaigned on a pledge to hold an independence referendum, won a landslide in the Scottish Parliament. The SNP leader, this man, Alex Salmond, you don't pronounce the L, like with the fish, became Scotland's first minister and promised a referendum within the election cycle. In 2012, British Prime Minister David Cameron finally agreed to a referendum, saying, "This United Kingdom can never hold a country within it without its consent." What he meant was, "I'm allowing this because it's certain to fail." Polls consistently show that only a minority of Scots would vote for actual independence. A yes campaign was set up, and also a no campaign, which isn't called the no campaign because that would sound a bit negative. Instead, it's called Better Together, which is arguably worse. Those in the yes camp include Alex Salmond and the SNP, and also the Scottish Green Party, the Scottish Socialist Party, possibly Rupert Murdoch, Sir Sean Connery, and both of the Proclaimers. The no camp includes all three main political parties, Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling, Susan Boyle, and one of the Doctor Who's. Not to mention a majority of the people in the rest of the UK who don't count because they don't get to vote. Those conspicuously offering no opinion include Andy Murray, Billy Connolly, and the Queen. Recently, the no camp's comfortable lead has eroded, and a lot of questions that nobody had ever answered satisfactorily have suddenly become interesting to people. Questions like, if it were independent, what would Scotland use for money? What about Scottish passports? Would Scotland be able to join the EU or NATO? And what will they call the rest of the UK if Scotland leaves? At the moment, they're literally calling it the rest of the UK, or RUK for short, which gives you an idea of how much thought has gone into the whole business. The real question is, will Scotland be better off as an independent country?
As seen throughout history, there are two sides to every issue. After the Brexit referendum, the Scottish National Party argued that Scotland was being pulled out of the EU against its will, and that this material change in circumstances justified another vote on Scottish independence. On the other hand, the Unionists largely fear economic repercussions. Scotland gains from its share in wealth generated throughout the state. Notably, the main generator of wealth is in London and southeast England. Thus, this sharing of resources is not something the Unionists are willing to give up. So, what were the results?
The people of Scotland have spoken, and it is a clear result. They have kept our country of four nations together.
Be brave and realise that Scotland can and should and will be successful in a prosperous independent country in its own right.
I want Scotland to stay in the UK, I want the UK to stay in Europe, I don't want to build up any new barriers.
The Bank of England was founded by a Scotsman.
Scotland's largest market is England,
with 16
and
and 17-year-olds being able to vote for the very first time,
Why is it that Scotland,
it left the younger
innovators
generation
and
with a
inventors
loud
of the
voice.
modern world?
Interview. This is my sister, Emily Gruffer, who lives in Scotland for the past 5 years. And this is her boyfriend, Declan McGinley, who is a Scottish citizen, and he is kind enough to answer some questions for us about the Scottish referendum.
Okay, so the first question that we have is, how old were you in 2014 for the referendum?
Yeah, so I think I was 19 or 20. So I think I was in my second year of uni, so 19.
And coming up to the referendum, was there a lot of tensions between both parties and both sides?
Yeah, so there was a sort of sustained debate in the run-up to the referendum was in September, and so I think a year prior to that, the yes side sent round a white paper, and it was essentially like a Bible of their policies to every home in Scotland, and that sort of kicked off the campaign. And then I was at the very start of my university, so I wasn't as politically engaged as I am now, but there was definitely TV debates throughout the year. There was, debates in town halls. There was, talk in the street. What was your question again?
If there were tensions between the sides, going up
so
to it.
There was definitely no tensions throughout the whole campaign. It was really civil. You would see, there's quite a famous photograph of a house, an attached house, and on one door has the yes memorabilia and posters, and the next door neighbours has the no side, posters, and they're out in their gardens, still neighbours and friends, but campaigning for either side. So no, there was definitely no tension throughout. There's no rivalry. It was a very civil campaign. I think it got applauded, if you like, on both sides about how the discourse was.
Did you find that it was more yes advertisements and campaigning, or about even?
Definitely even, yeah. And it would depend, driving through communities, there'd be massive yes boards, and then the other side of the road, there'd be a big no board, on a farm, for example. So you saw all of it. I guess full disclosure, I was a yes voter in the end.
We were going to ask, so.
Yeah, and I didn't, to be fair though, at the time in the campaign, I don't think I knew that yet, but I definitely noticed yes more, but that's more of a, that's more of a personal answer. I think I'd probably just biased towards the yes campaign, that's why I noticed it more, but I'd say definitely 50-50. It's a very split issue, and it still is to this day in polling data.
Mm-hmm. Was there a lot more of the younger generation voting towards yes, or did you notice that?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's still the trend in polling today. And since 2014, you've seen some age demographics swing more yes, but absolutely, younger tends to swing as strongly yes.
What is the voting age in Scotland?
So that's a good question. So since there's layers to that question. So Scotland, just for full clarity, is obviously part of the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is Scotland, England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And the voting age for Scottish-only elections for the Scottish Parliament is 16. And that is a recent change. I don't know when it came into play, but that wasn't there for the 2014 referendum. When the next one comes down the road, and I think it will. I think it's an if, not a when. 16 will be the age. But for UK level voting for the House of Commons, Big Ben, that's 18.
Okay. So the result has been revealed in the video, but were you surprised by the result of the election?
Was I surprised? I was gutted. Yeah. Was I gutted? Yeah, I think I was disappointed with the return. The result. Maybe not surprised. It's a big question. Do you want your country? Do you want Scotland to be independent? I think was on the polling card. So there's loads of anxiety towards that. What does that mean for your pensions, your house, your currency? Are we going to be part of the EU? So no, I wasn't surprised, because that's you can't blame people for not wanting to take on that risk. It's quite a big step change. I'd be surprised though now if it doesn't happen. I'd be more surprised if it didn't happen in the next 20 years or so. I think the yes campaign definitely dipped off. You would do with your enthusiasm levels, and then as Brexit was the next big inflection point, I think, in UK politics. I think Brexit has then tipped the Scottish interest in independence back towards the yes side. I'm talking about the debate in general. You can't really talk about Scottish politics without talking about the constitutional question. So, so we saw this dip in talking about it, and then very quickly, 2015, we knew that we were going to have a referendum on the European Union, and then 2016, obviously, we voted for Brexit.
But all of Scotland voted to remain in the European Union, which was interesting, because when you look at the polling data of the whole UK as a whole, Scotland was 100% we're going to stay in the EU, but then Brexit still obviously went through because they didn't have the majority of the votes, and so I think that was what that's what started this uptick, like Declan was saying, and more interest for an independent Scotland, because now there was a reason more of a reason to leave the UK, because they could go into the EU again, like they wanted to vote for in the first place. Yeah,
so and that's a really good point, because one of the big, in the 2014 referendum, one of the big no-vote pillars of, argument points was, if we go independent, we're going to have to leave the European Union, and then obviously 2 years later, the same campaigners for the no campaign were then campaigning for Brexit, of just doing exactly that, of exiting the European Union. It's muddied the water, the two issues, but and the talk dropped off, but it came back very quickly with the European Union question arising.
Yeah, because now it's the EU question, and it's COVID and stuff too. But I remember after Brexit happened, I came to the UK after Brexit had already been voted on, because that happened when you were at LSU. But when I only came to post-Brexit, or I guess transitional Britain. But there were ads going around in Scotland for, like, it was like that whole campaign of people who had voted no on independence first, and now who would change their mind for yes. And like basically saying it's okay to change your mind. Like, you know, there's new information that's happened. Like, it's not, this isn't the same question anymore. I think is the whole basis for the new referendum. Johnson's pretty much categorically said no, that is not going to happen.
That's the current UK government's take on it. Which can't really fly. You know, like the 2015 general election for the UK government, I think the Conservative Party won it with a UK share of like 37% of the vote, but like the Scottish National Party, who are the current government of the day in Scotland, won the vote share in Scotland with I think 47% of the vote. So you know, you can't say there's no democratic mandate for it. And on their manifesto was an Indie Ref too.
Yeah, that was one of their campaign promises almost, is that they want a new independence referendum.
So the context of that is Conservative government in 2015 won the UK general election 37% of the vote, and on their manifesto was that they would have an EU ballot of whether we stay or exit the EU. And so they had a democratic mandate, you know, which they did. But now they're saying that a 47% share in Scotland isn't a democratic mandate, and you know, there's a lot of talk about, it's too soon, it should be a once in a generation vote, but you know, it's not how democracy works. So you know, I think we will see one.
Yeah, and there's a once in a generation huge change to the way your country is governed too, because you were taking out the EU against your will, essentially.
I know I've sort of derailed your question set, but to clarify what you were saying there, so the UK is made up of 4 nations, and there are devolved powers. And health is devolved to each nation. And then I think COVID has just been a snapshot in time where the electorate has seen the Scottish government setting Scottish policy on COVID and doing much better. Although I don't know if you look at the numbers now, if you looked at deaths or cases, I don't know how we're doing now, but there was a long sustained period throughout last year where Scotland was held up as the example, and our government was held up as an example of how to react. And then, you know, the present UK government are applauded for many things up here anyway. And so I think that was another opportunity for the electorate to see why are we under the UK government when we've demonstrated via COVID, or there is demonstration via COVID that, you know, there's competence within Scotland for, you know, political autonomy and economic autonomy. So the polling numbers as a result of COVID right now, well, not right now, last year were very high. They tipped, they were, you know, I think at one point it peaked at like 56% in favour of a yes vote.
Yeah.
And that's probably, I think that's come back down now, but you know, it always will, it'll fluctuate.
Yeah, but it's funny, like, putting it in terms of COVID and Brexit, and because I think you said that earlier, Mallory, but like every question, every political argument gets put against independence. I think, you know, every time, you can't bring up politics without bringing up independence. It's like the hot button issue.
No, not here.
Like, for example, like COP26 that was just in Glasgow. That's where Declan's from originally. We're at Edinburgh now. But they didn't want Nicola Sturgeon taking photos with world leaders because they didn't want that to be a campaign, you know, rally around for independence. Because, like, you know, there's the whole like question of recognition, you know, and like if you recognize someone as a nation state and stuff like that. So they're trying to keep her away from those big photo ops. It's like, no, we're not doing that. But just for COP26, that's like a global challenge. You know what I mean? Like the climate crisis or whatever. It's not country specific. That's what the whole point of COP26 was. And it was still, independence was still involved in that conversation.
Yeah, it's a time where, like, you know, nations should be coming together to assess the climate crisis, but we're playing internal politics about independence. It's just not great. Yeah, like there was a leaked text that they didn't want the First Minister of Scotland to have a photo taken with her and Biden.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just petty.
Which she got anyway.
Yeah, sorry, we derailed you.
No, that's fine. Well, we only have one final question, which I think we can guess your answer. But if there was another referendum, would you still vote yes?
Yes, I would. I think ultimately, like, Scotland's voting intentions in the UK Parliament have never been returned since like 1959 in terms of Scotland voting one way, and then that same result mapping to across the UK to the House of Commons. So I think it's important for people who live in Scotland to be able to vote and choose for what they want. So yeah, ultimately would. That's not to say there's not questions that need to be answered.
Like, what are some of those questions?
Yeah, I'm coming on to that.
Oh, sorry.
Like currency, for example, is a big one. What happens? We use pounds, so to all of the UK. What happens when we leave? I don't know. It's a massive macroeconomic question. Do you keep pounds, but then you can't have any fiscal autonomy over the pound because the Bank of England does. So what happens if we enter a pandemic like we all have in the last year? You can't shore up your currency or help businesses in times of economic plight. Like the Federal Reserve in the US obviously printed dollars to help employers and people through COVID, just as they did in 2008. But if a country like Scotland or say Louisiana went independent but then used the dollar, who's to say that the United States Federal Reserve would help them out? But yeah, ultimately I think I would. I know I'd vote yes.
Will Scotland be better off as an independent country? And the real answer is nobody knows, because it's the future.